Welcome back, everyone, to another explosive Fallout 3 exploration video.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so excited to be diving deep with you this week. Hope you're having a fantastic few days wherever you are listening to us.
I hope it's going well.
Today, we are undertaking, well, it's a monumental task, really, a three-parter.
Ambitious.
We're establishing the known facts, the wild theories, and just the sheer absurdity surrounding one of the most powerful, most consequential, and I'd say arguably most unstable protagonist in the entire Fallout universe, the Lone Wanderer.
It's necessary viewing, frankly. We're talking about the protagonist who, unlike maybe some other Wasteland saviors, achieved canonical demigod status,
Right.
solved the capital Wasteland's generational problems in less than a year, and then, according to all sources, seemingly decided they were too cool for school and just vanished, evaporated.
Exactly. So our mission today, kicking off part one of this deep dive, is to sort through this huge stack of lore, fan theories, developer notes, all of it. Yeah, cut through the noise. We need to lock down the canonical timeline up through the Broken Steel DLC and really confront that pervasive fan theory. Is the Lone Wanderer secretly like a complete psycho who just happened to choose the path of very good karma?
Well, you can't really understand the mystery of their disappearance without first understanding the sheer level of, existential power and, frankly, the psychological trauma they were wielding by age 20. It's a lot.
It's the only way to contextualize the legend. And just as a little teaser, for the rest of this three-part deep dive, we are tackling the biggest questions. Did they travel 2,000 miles to become the mysterious Courier?
The big one.
Are they secretly Deacon,
Yeah.
the constantly lying railroad agent?
Interesting.
Or did they just take the Z-Tan flying saucer they acquired? Yes, a literal alien spaceship, and just say, screw this rock, I'm going to space.
It's on the table. They do have the ship.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning.
Right.
Section 1. The Vault 101, Anomaly, Canonical Origins, and Defining Traits.
The origin story.
Right, and unlike, say, the protagonists of Fallout 4 or New Vegas, the Lone Wanderer's origin story is way more specific, more canonical, mainly because we literally witnessed the first 19 years of their life, pretty much start to finish.
Yeah, we're there for it.
We know they were born on a very specific date,
Right.
July 13th, 2258.
And that date is the first massive lore nugget right there. They are born on the surface.
Not in the vault.
No. At the Jefferson Memorial, right in the middle of the first aborted iteration of Project Purity. They are not a vault dweller by birthright at all. They're an outsider brought in, which immediately makes them a contradiction,
And tragically, their mother, Catherine, she died almost immediately after delivery. Sudden cardiac arrest.
Yeah, it's brutal. And Dr. Madison, that's Lee, L.I.
Lee.
She was actually the acting nurse during the birth, which is a fantastic piece of, connective tissue. It gives us some insight into her dedication to Project Purity later on.
Following that tragedy, James, the father, he immediately suspended the project, took his newborn baby, and traveled to Vault 101.
And it wasn't an easy trip either. Sources confirm James was protected by Star Paladin Cross.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, defending them from raiders, mutated creatures along the way. It shows the level of commitment James had, to the child and the urgency of getting them underground.
This foundational lie, it's so key to the Lone Wanderer's eventual, let's say, instability. James keeps the LW's true surface origin a secret. Why? To maintain the pretense of the Vault 101 social experiment.
Which, of course, was designed to observe the effects of prolonged, uninterrupted isolation, like a control group.
Yeah, the LW's entire life is basically a controlled variable in a flawed sociological study.
Exactly. It's supposed to be this perfectly sterile, sheltered life. And we track specific canonical developmental checkpoints inside the vault, which gives us this unusually deep psychological profile compared to, other protagonists.
Right, like at age 1, they're babbling. By age 10, we had the classic birthday party. The overseer gives them the Pip-Boy 3000.
Standard issue.
And James and Jonas Palmer give them a BB gun. And we have these hilarious, almost mundane details. Like between 10 and 16, the LW pitches 4 strikeouts in Vault 101 baseball games.
An athlete.
Who?
Apparently.
A jock. And then the critical moment at 16, they take the Generalized Occupational Aptitude Test, the GOAT exam.
The GOAT.
He lived this entirely contained, isolated existence, knowing every single guard and resident by name, his intimate, almost familial structure that becomes central to the psychological fallout later when they're forced to leave.
Okay, let's talk canonical default traits. Because while the character is player created and gender is technically ambiguous,
Technically.
developer notes and promotional materials have leaned pretty heavily toward a specific default. There's a strong push toward a default male identity.
Yeah, the name Albert was used in promotional previews, which is clearly, an homage to the Fallout 1 protagonist Albert Cole.
Oh, okay.
And Fallout Shelter Online and Dr. Lee's own biography often refer to the LW using male pronouns, specifically mentioning James's son. So, while we have to acknowledge the player freedom, the official meta-narrative seems to paint a clearer picture there.
It does. Physically, if you dig into the game files, the default setup is mixed race.
Right, African-American mother, Catherine, and a Caucasian father, James.
Yep. Gives them the default brown eyes, dark hair, typically wearing the armored Vault 101 jumpsuit, using that N99 10mm pistol they get from Amata.
Right.
This grounding in a specific visual identity is actually pretty unusual for Bethesda, and it speaks to their attempt to give the LW like a fixed historical place. Even the Lone Wanderer beard style shows up in Fallout 4.
So, okay, we're talking about Albert, James's mixed-race son. Lived this painfully sheltered life for 19 years. Then the catalyst that kicks off the entire story sends this very specific, very sheltered individual out into the wasteland. It's monumental in its pettiness.
It truly is the ultimate midlife crisis turned apocalyptic event.
Yep.
James, after nearly 2 decades of just laying low, suddenly decides to restart Project Purity, the one thing he swore off after his wife died. And he just disappears, leaves only a cryptic note.
Okay, wait, let's pause here, because this is where the character analysis really starts getting juicy. Given James's history, hyper control, keeping the vault sealed to protect the LW, what did the sources say about his psychological state? Like, what led to this catastrophic decision?
Well, the sources suggest James was driven by 2 main factors. 1, immense guilt over Catherine's death. He saw it as his failure.
Okay.
And 2, this belief that the LW was finally old enough to handle the truth. He views Project Purity not just as his dream, but as Catherine's legacy.
Right.
So he leaves the vault not because he's abandoning his son in his mind, but because he believes the LW is ready to follow him, to fulfill their destiny together.
Wow, that's some profound self-justification, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's basically saying, I raised you perfectly to be the ultimate vault dweller, now go prove it by fixing the world I broke.
Pretty much.
The entire fate of the capital Wasteland, the survival of the Brotherhood of Steel, the ultimate destruction of the Enclave, it all hinges on a single man's decision to ditch his 19-year-old kid to complete a science project dream. What in the actual fuck, James? That is profoundly selfish.
Selfish, yes, but effective, you could say. It ensures the protagonist, the Lone Wanderer, leaves the vault. And that single act leads us directly into the canonical timeline of their world-changing actions. Turns a simple search for Dad into, a global military conflict.
Which takes us straight to Section 2 then. Achieving demigod status, the canonical ending, and DLC impact.
The power creep section.
Seriously, this is where we need to spend some real time, because the sheer density of accomplishments the LW racks up between age 19 and 20 is just staggering. It all culminates in 2277 at the Project Purity climax, the baptism by fire and FEV.
That confrontation, it's the ultimate turning point. The LW finds James finally, only for Colonel Autumn and the Enclave to immediately show up and try to seize the purifier.
Right on cue.
And James sacrifices himself, fills the control chamber with deadly radiation, specifically to halt the Enclave's takeover and deny them the clean water supply. Just stops them cold.
And this leads us to the critical recton, the change that cemented the Lone Wanderer's legend. Originally, the ending of Fallout 3 required the player, either the LW or Sentinel Sarah Lyons, to die or fall into a permanent coma activating the purifier because of the radiation.
Right, it was a sacrifice ending, but the Broken Steel DLC completely overrides that. It is now the definitive canonical ending, period.
Okay.
The Lone Wanderer survives the fatal dose of radiation, wakes up 2 weeks later at the Citadel, recovering from what's essentially a radiation-induced coma.
That's the first major clue, isn't it? That the LW isn't just resilient, they're biologically different. Superhuman, maybe?
Functionally immune to lethal radiation. It's a key power, pretty unique to this protagonist in the series. No one else just walks off that kind of dose.
Upon waking, Elder Lyons immediately makes them a Knight of the Brotherhood of Steel for their heroic actions.
Big promotion.
And crucially, canonical lore confirms the LW activated Project Purity without using President Eden's modified FEV virus. The death serum designed to poison all mutated life.
And we know this detail is rock solid. canon. Because of this obscure little dialogue line in Fallout 4,
Oh, yeah.
Deacon, the railroad agent, he makes an idle comment about the capital Wasteland water actually being drinkable now.
No way.
Yeah. This tiny throwaway line confirms the purifier was running clean water, which sets up the foundation for the successful, benevolent Brotherhood of Steel presence we see later in Fallout 4. Their whole triumph is solely attributable to the LW.
But the cleanup, it was far from over. Right, the LW's mission rapidly expanded. It went from find Dad to distribute purified water, and most critically, neutralize the remaining Enclave threat.
Which culminates in that highly tactical endgame assault on Adams Air Force Base.
This is the definitive world-changing act that secures the East Coast. The LW infiltrates Adams AFB, fights through wave after wave of highly trained, power-armored soldiers,
Elite troops.
and manages to hijack the orbital satellite array, specifically the Bradley Hercules system.
Right, and they use its remaining missile payload to just obliterate the Enclave's mobile base crawler.
Let's stop and analyze the geopolitical fallout of that action for a second. Destroying the mobile base crawler wasn't just like defeating a big robot.
No, it was decapitation.
Exactly. It functionally decapitated the organized military and logistical capabilities of the Enclave on the entire East Coast. That crawler was their mobile HQ, their supply line, their heavy artillery staging ground.
Everything.
By removing it, the Lone Wanderer single-handedly secured Project Purity and set the Brotherhood of Steel on its path to regional dominance. Full stop.
It's probably the highest single military achievement any Fallout protagonist has accomplished, just in terms of scope and lasting effect on a region. And remember, all of this happens by the time the LW is barely 20 years old. It's insane.
And we can't forget the sheer scope of the LW's other canonical adventures that just expand this legend. They participated in the operation.
Yeah.
Anchorage Simulation.
Right, where they gained access to a perfect digital recreation of pre-war Chinese-US combat.
Which isn't just like a combat rating increase in the game. They gained the tactical knowledge, the experience,
Yeah.
and the infamous Chinese stealth suit.
Making them effectively a silent, highly effective assassin with perfect military training, on top of everything else.
Then they changed the fate of the Raider City of the Pit, forced that moral choice between siding with the enslaved or the slavers.
Yeah.
Hugely impacting Pittsburgh's power structure.
Yeah, major consequences there. Then they intervened in ancient feuds at Point Lookout, descended into some real Lovecraftian horror,
Weird stuff.
and gained strange psychic powers. And it's during that adventure that we see the first explicit developer-driven textual evidence that the LW has serious self-loathing issues.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, a hint of the psychological analysis to come. It's symbolized by that strange ritual in the sacred bog.
Right.
Really dark undertones.
And then, the ultimate power grab. Mothership Zeta, this 19-year-old Vault escapee, gets abducted by aliens.
As you do.
Fights a successful revolution against the Zetan command structure, and ends up hijacking a fully functional alien spacecraft. They now have an orbital satellite weapon array and a literal starship.
It's an accumulation of power that is just profoundly unbalanced in the Fallout universe. You start as a kid looking for your dad, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of the DLC, you are an armored, night-ranked, radiation-immune, alien-slaying space pirate who commands 2 orbital weapon systems. The narrative decision to grant this level of power is goddamn brilliant for the player, obviously, but terrifying for the lore.
Which brings us neatly, and yet terrifyingly, to Section 3. The Lone Wanderer. This psychoanalysis of violent necessity.
The dark side.
Because when you stack up these canonical achievements, even if you play with maximum very good karma, the sheer scale of the violence suggests something is fundamentally broken about this character.
Exactly. This is the central paradox we need to really dig into. The Lone Wanderer can be played as a pure humanitarian, distributing water, saving orphans.
Well, Wasteland, Jesus, rather.
Right. Yet the game structure itself dictates that most of their major roadblocks, from escaping Vault 101 to taking Adams AFB, must be solved with overwhelming, often really unnecessary force.
And the Fallout 3 dialogue options. They're notoriously simplistic compared to, say, New Vegas. They often fail, right? Which just pushes the player into violence as the path of least resistance.
It often is the easiest, or sometimes the only path forward mechanically.
We look through fan discussions pointing out the absurdity of the canonical timeline. They're killing hordes of trogs with nothing but a metal cutter in the pit. That's a melee weapon.
Yeah, just wading in.
Or systematically slaughtering every single living alien on that vessel in Mothership Zeta.
Yeah.
This is a kid operating at like Doom Slayer levels of calculated, persistent brutality.
And we have to analyze the Enclave Slayer reputation from a lore perspective, too. The LW single-handedly takes down entire swaths of power-armored soldiers at Project Purity, Raven Rock, Adams AFB.
Trained soldiers in power armor?
Exactly. One source we looked at referred to the LW as a demigod of a teenager who survived lethal radiation and then soloed two major organizations, the Enclave and Talon Company, which are essentially standing armies.
Right.
This is physically, tactically, and frankly, psychologically impossible for a normal human being. Something else is going on there.
The psychological trauma starts immediately, too.
Yeah.
We can't just glide past the Vault 101 escape. Even on a good karma run, the LW kills familiar people on the way out.
Yeah, this is crucial.
As noted in multiple source discussions, every single guard the LW encounters during the escape is named. Officer Gomez, Stanley.
These are people the LW grew up with, played baseball with, probably saw every single day in the mess hall.
Yeah.
Buddies, maybe.
The sheer ability to just transition from sheltered child to cold-blooded killer in a single afternoon suggests a deeply traumatized, maybe even dissociative individual.
I think so. The trauma of their father leaving, coupled with the revelation that their whole life was a lie, it could easily cause a psychological break. They're forced to reconcile their naive, sheltered perspective with the reality of being this alpha and omega chaos agent in the Wasteland.
That ability to instantly flip the switch from pacifist to mass murderer, and it's a hallmark of profound instability.
Definitely.
And gameplay elements are instrumental in reinforcing this terrifying caricature, in the Wasteland's collective mind. The VATS system, that's VATS.
Especially in Fallout 3.
Yeah, it made the LW essentially invincible during combat animations, freezing time to meticulously target weak points.
That mechanic, when you view it through a lore lens, suggests something unnatural, like an unnatural focus, a heightened state of awareness, or perhaps even a temporary break from reality that allows the LW to process combat at superhuman speed.
It absolutely elevates them beyond just a standard hero.
For sure. Furthermore, their incredibly high SPECIAL stats, that's special, combined with powerful perks and high-level gear, means they just become a nearly unkillable force of nature. So the legends surrounding them become completely distorted. Wildly exaggerated, probably.
We found the perfect example of this in the sources. The legendary tale of the low-intelligence sledgehammer murderer.
Oh, this one's great.
The fact that a character with the lowest possible intelligence stat, who speaks like a, drooling idiot, could apparently take out Megaton with just a sledgehammer at low levels, that speaks volumes.
It does. The Lone Wanderer isn't just defined by what they did, but by the fact that anyone, regardless of intelligence or motivation, could potentially become this godlike, terrifying entity of destruction using that framework.
Think about that reputation filtering through the Wasteland. The Lone Wanderer isn't just a hero. They are whispered about as a homicidal maniac who eats bloatfly meat and K-fungus, fights death claws in a nightgown.
They are chaos personified. You can be distributing clean water to orphans 1 minute. But you also have a body count in the thousands by the age of 20, and you casually own a Zaytan spaceship. This constant dissonance reinforces the idea that the good karma LW is simply a highly functional but profoundly fucking disturbed warmonger who just happens to channel their instability toward the greater good, for now.
It's the ultimate war never changes narrative, right? Told through the lens of one person's questionable mental stability. They might have achieved peace for the region, but they themselves are kind of the living embodiment of the war they fought.
Yeah. The level of power they accumulated fundamentally made them incompatible with normal society. How could they ever just settle down?
Which makes perfect sense then, heading into Section 4. The mystery begins leaving the capital Wasteland. Given the sheer unmatched power and the implied psychological breakdown, it makes total sense that the Lone Wanderer chooses to leave. Why stick around when you've essentially become a radioactive, power-armored, alien ship-owning legend who solved everything?
There was simply nothing left for them to anchor to, really. The family goal, James's dream of Project Purity, was fulfilled, but James himself was dead.
Right.
Their literal home, Vault 101, was closed off or outright rejected them. We know that regardless of the player's choice in the Vault 101 Civil War storyline,
Trouble follows.
yeah, the dialogue option often involves Amada basically telling the LW to get lost. Because their presence, their legend, it threatens the delicate balance of the Vault experiment. They're too big, too dangerous now.
So no home, no family objective. What about the Brotherhood of Steel? They literally knighted them.
Even those affiliations were shaky, I think. The Brotherhood was never really home for the LW. It was more a means to an end, a powerful ally.
Okay.
And importantly, the Brotherhood was already starting to change, especially after the inevitable passing of Elder Lyons. His health was failing even during the game.
Good point.
Lyons' compassionate, benevolent vision, which was the reason the LW was accepted in the first place, that was destined to fade. His death paved the way for the more dogmatic, isolationist leadership of Arthur Maxson later on.
Right, the Maxson we see in Fallout 4.
Exactly, which makes the LW's position within the Barrios precarious at best. They were a savior under Lyons, sure, but potentially a threat or an ideological liability under the rising Maxson regime. Too independent, too powerful.
And let's be honest about their relationships in the settlements. Megaton, Tenpenny Tower. They were just places to dump gear, right? Stash houses. Not solid relationship.
Not really. The Lone Wanderer, defined by their solitary title, never seemed to form those solid anchoring bonds needed to settle down. It feels like the personal price of saving the world was everything else, isolation.
This is where we bring up that fascinating, although technically non-canon, entry by Moira Brown. It's in the official game guide afterward.
Oh yeah, Moira's notes.
She suggests that by 2297, so 2 decades later, the LW had kept traveling and eventually just disappeared. Her notes show their legend became so distorted that people couldn't even agree if the Wanderer was a man or a woman, a saint or a monster.
It solidifies the idea that they truly became a mythical figure, lost to time and rumor.
That entry, canon or not, it perfectly captures the character's legacy, I think. And it defines the massive chronological gap we're looking at, which is the key to part 2 of this deep dive.
The gap.
Fallout 4 takes place in 2287. That's 10 years after the main events of Fallout 3 and Broken Steel. The Lone Wanderer is only around 29 or 30 years old at that point.
Still young. Prime adventuring age.
Which leaves an entire decade of history completely unwritten. Blank.
That is the decade of legend making. And it's that void that generates the 3 primary paths of speculation, the main theories about what happened next, which we will be diving into extensively in the coming deep dives.
Path 1, the space adventurer.
Took the keys to the Zeta.
Yeah. Took off on Mothership Zeta and is now scouting the galaxy. Maybe inadvertently causing that alien ship crash we see in Fallout 4. The LW is quite literally traveling beyond the confines of the Earth.
It's plausible, given the asset they possess. Path 2. The Protector, or Bawas loyalists, they stayed on the East Coast, maybe managing remnants, fighting super mutants.
Hiking around.
Right. Maybe dying in the same incident that supposedly killed Sentinel Sarah Lyons. Or being quietly removed or exiled by the ascending Maxson regime.
Ooh, dark.
This path provides a more tragic, grounded end to the hero's tale. Maybe a more realistic one, depending on how you view the Bawas.
And Path 3, the ultimate true wanderer, who simply pack their bags and possibly their dog meat, though the lore gets tangled there about which dog meat.
Always a dog meat.
Always a dog meat and just headed west. This final path, the idea that they crossed the entire continental U.S., it leads directly to the most controversial, chronologically challenging, and frankly, fucking massive theory of all.
The big one.
That the Lone Wanderer somehow became Courier 6 in the Mojave.
And that crossover theory, bridging 2 distinct character identities across 2,000 miles in a decade, that's going to be the centerpiece of our next discussion. Get ready.
Okay, so let's recap part 1. We have established the Lone Wanderer as Albert, James's mixed-race son. A 19-year-old radiation-immune knight of the Brotherhood of Steel.
Quite the resume.
They saved the capital Wasteland, single-handedly crippled the Enclave by destroying their mobile base crawler, and literally owns a functioning Zetan starship. All while retaining the psychological makeup of a highly capable, highly dangerous maniac who killed basically everyone he knew in his childhood home to escape.
They are arguably the most effective and overpowerful protagonists in the entire series, just an unstoppable force. And yet, they consciously chose to leave the stage entirely before they even turned 30, abandoning the world they fought so hard to save.
Next time in part 2, we are diving deep into that massive chronological leap and the most compelling fan theory that tries to bridge the continent. Did the Lone Wanderer travel 2,000 miles in 4 years to become Courier 6?
We will lay out the arguments for why that works, as headcanon, the circumstantial evidence, and more importantly, the definitive canonical lore breaks that pretty much shatter that theory.
Yeah, we gotta look at both sides.
We'll specifically be addressing the fatal flaw involving the first battle for Hoover Dam and the events in the Divide. Stuff that makes the Courier Wanderer crossover, strictly speaking, a chronological impossibility, at least by the established sequence of events we have.
But I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over until our next deep dive. Considering the world-changing, almost absurd level of chaotic violence the Lone Wanderer was forced to enact to become a good guy, was their subsequent decision to leave the capital Wasteland an act of selfless wandering? Or was it simply the realization that they were too powerful, too broken, and frankly, too much of a chaotic force to ever be allowed to settle down among the people they saved?
Sometimes the only safe place for a god, or a demigod, is somewhere else entirely, away from mortals.
Keep digging for those nuggets of knowledge, everyone, and we'll see you next time for part 2 of The Lone Wanderer's Last Stand.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We are right back into it, continuing our big look at maybe the greatest mystery in, well, the entire Wasteland saga. What on earth happened to the Lone Wanderer?
It really is the ultimate cold case, isn't it? When we last left off, the Wanderer had just wrapped up Broken Steel. That's 2277. And they were, calling them overpowered is kind of an understatement.
Totally. Age 20, basically immune to lethal radiation, a knight in the Brotherhood of Steel, the person who crippled the Enclave on the East Coast. Oh, and casually owns a working alien spaceship.
Yeah, the Mothership Zeta thing. That's a big one we'll come back to. A literal demigod with interstellar capability.
And then nothing. Just silence. A huge gap opens up in the timeline. We've got this, decade-long void between the Wanderer hitting peak power in 2277 and the next big game, Fallout 4, kicking off in 2287.
Or even more tantalizingly, that 4-year window leading up to 2281, which is when Fallout New Vegas starts, and that 4-year gap. That's really our focus today.
Exactly. So our mission for this part of the deep dive is tackling that massive continental question. Did the Lone Wanderer actually wander 2,000 miles west across all that devastation to become Courier 6 in the Mojave Desert?
It's the theory, the big one, the two Wastelands at canon. We're going to dig into why it's so incredibly popular, why it feels right to so many people, and then look at the hard, cold, canonical facts that, well, pretty much shatter it completely.
Right. Gotta understand the appeal before you bring out the lore hammer.
Yeah.
So, first things first. Why would the Wanderer even leave the capital Wasteland? They just saved it.
Yeah, you'd think they'd stick around, right? Take a victory lap.
Yeah.
But really, the reasons for leaving are almost overwhelming when you look closely.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that inevitability of exile.
Okay, section 1. Why live home? Despite being the big hero, they were also incredibly isolated, weren't they? No real anchor left.
Absolutely no anchor. Think about the core motivation. Find Dad. Finish Project Purity. Well, Project Purity is running, but James is dead. The whole reason for the journey, the emotional linchpin, is gone.
So the primary objective is met, but the personal connection is severed. What do you do then? You've achieved the impossible, saved the region, but the person driving you is just gone.
And where do you go? Home. Well, Vault 101, their actual childhood home, that door slammed shut. Whether you sided with the Martyr or the Overseer, the end result is pretty much the same.
Right. The vault closes itself off. They see the Wanderer as, what, a contamination? A threat?
Both, probably. The Wanderer is the outside world made manifest. Their very existence, their legend, it's destabilizing for that controlled little experiment. You can't just slot a Wasteland demigod back into Vault life. A Marauder, even if she's your friend, basically has to say, you're too much, you have to go so we can survive.
Wow. So save your father's dreams, save the Wasteland, and lose your home in the process. That's bleak.
It's a pure Fallout irony, isn't it? And the other places. Mega 10, Tenpenny Tower. Let's be honest, those were just convenient spots to dump gear and maybe grab a quest.
Yeah, glorified stash boxes. Not exactly deep community roots.
Not at all. They weren't building a life there.
Yeah.
Any companions like Fox or Charon were more like allies of convenience or transactional relationships, even with high karma. The lone part of Lone Wanderer feels earned,
Yeah.
They end up profoundly solitary.
And that solitude, that lack of deep connection, plays right into the instability with their biggest potential home, the Brotherhood of Steel.
Oh, definitely. Their position in the Brotherhood was entirely dependent on one man, Elder Owen Lyons.
Who immediately makes them a knight after they wake up from that radiation coma in Broken Steel, which is a huge deal.
A huge deal, and a huge departure from Brotherhood tradition. Lyons' whole compassionate, outward-looking, help the Wastelanders philosophy was already controversial within the Brotherhood ranks, bringing in this powerful outsider, giving them rank. That was all Lyons.
But Lyons' health was failing. That's mentioned, right? His leadership was precarious.
Exactly. It was always hanging by a thread. And everyone knew, or at least suspected, that when Lyons passed, things would change dramatically.
Which leads directly to Arthur Maxon.
The heir apparent. Descended from the original founder, Roger Maxon. He represents the old guard, The return to the Brotherhood's core tenets, technology hoarding, isolationism, military structure, everything Lyons was moving away from.
So the Lone Wanderer, this symbol of Lyon's progressive era, suddenly becomes an ideological liability under Maxim?
A massive one. Think about it. You've got this 20-year-old powerhouse who is radiation immune, incredibly skilled, answers to basically no one, and embodies the humanitarian approach Maxim wants to scrap.
And they have enormous influence and respect after stopping the Enclave. Wouldn't Maxim maybe try to use that? Co-opt them?
He might try, initially. But the Wanderer is just too independent, too powerful. Maxim demands order, hierarchy, following the Codex. Can you imagine the Lone Wanderer taking orders to, catalog laser pistols after they just saved DC?
No, especially not if they've got, an alien spaceship parked somewhere.
Right. That's the other thing. The Mothership Zeta acquisition. That makes the Wanderer not just an ideological problem, but a strategic one. They possess technology far beyond what even the Brotherhood has easy access to. They're a rogue state unto themselves.
So trying to force them into Maxim's rigid structure would inevitably lead to conflict. They'd either have to submit, which seems unlikely,
or resist. And resisting would make them a symbol for anyone unhappy with Maxim's leadership, a potential catalyst for civil war within the Brotherhood itself.
So leaving wasn't just wandering off. It might have been the only way to avoid tearing the Brotherhood apart or being forced out violently. A strategic withdrawal, almost.
Precisely. They saved the capital Wasteland, and then maybe they saved the Brotherhood from itself by simply disappearing. Which ties perfectly into how their legend evolves.
Ah, the Moira Brown connection. From the game guide stuff, right? The notes written later on.
Yeah, the supplemental material. It's controversial for some, but it gives us this glimpse into the future. Around 2297, 20 years after Broken Steel. And by then, the Lone Wanderer has well and truly vanished.
Vanished to the point of myth. The notes say people couldn't even agree on basic facts anymore.
Exactly. Was the Wanderer a man or a woman? A saint or a monster? The legend became so distorted, so detached from reality, that the actual person was lost. They became a boogeyman or a folk hero, but not a person anymore.
Which reinforces the idea that they just couldn't fit into normal society after everything. They became too big, too strange. The weight of their own legend kind of pushed them out.
The only place for a myth like that is the wilderness, the unknown. Or maybe somewhere else entirely. But that leads us westward.
Okay, section 2. The big leap. The continent crossing. The Lone Wanderer becomes Courier 6. This theory is it's everywhere in the fandom.
It's huge, contentious, yeah, but massively popular. The whole two Wastelands concept connecting Fallout 3 and New Vegas protagonists.
And you can see the appeal, right? It neatly solves the what happened next problem. They didn't settle down, they just kept going, living up to the Wanderer title.
It provides that narrative purpose, and crucially, the timeline seems to work at first glance. Just barely.
Let's lay it out again. Fallout 3 and Broken Steel end in 2277. New Vegas starts in 2281. That leaves 4 years.
4 years. To get from DC to Nevada, that's about 2,000 miles.
Across hell, basically. Super mutants, raiders, deathclaws, rad scorpions, hostile environments, probably remnants of the Enclave or other factions.
It sounds insane for a normal person. Absolutely impossible. But are we talking about a normal person?
No. We established that. Radiation immunity, peak skills, probably power armor, access to advanced tech, maybe even salvaged vehicles. Fans will love to speculate about finding a working highwayman car or a motorcycle, right?
Or even, fixing up an Enclave vertibird they captured. For this character, this demigod of a teenager, as you call them, maybe the physical journey isn't the most impossible part.
Okay, maybe physically possible, but the theory's real hook, the thing that makes it stick for people, is the psychological angle, isn't it? The Courier's backstory.
Exactly. The Courier starts in New Vegas, famously getting shot twice in the head by Benny, left for dead in a shallow grave near Good Springs. They survive, but they have amnesia, a blank slate.
And the headcanon jumps right on that. Those bullets weren't just inconvenient, they were the reset button. They wiped the Lone Wanderer's memories, their skills, their past traumas.
It explains everything. Why the Courier doesn't remember DC, why they don't start with maxed out stats, why they seem so detached initially. The trauma of the shooting is the bridge that allows the Lone Wanderer persona to be overwritten by the Courier persona.
It's a brutal but narratively elegant way to connect the dots. It also explains why this seemingly ordinary mail carrier suddenly becomes capable of taking on the NCR, the Legion, Mr. House, and deciding the fate of the entire Mojave. The underlying power level is still there, just latent. forgotten.
And players lean into this hard. You see so many people intentionally designing their Courier character to look identical to their Lone Wanderer playthrough. It's about maintaining that personal continuity, even if the games don't explicitly state it. Player agency filling the void.
Beyond the amnesia, there are those little breadcrumbs in the lore, especially from the DLCs that seem to hint at it, like Ulysses and Lonesome Road.
Ulysses. The original Courier 6, the one who refused the platinum chip delivery. He talks to the player Courier and he makes these cryptic remarks.
About the Courier having this weird fixation on old world symbols, especially Enclave symbols. Things like the flag, the tech.
Yeah, an unnatural focus, he calls it. Which is weird, right? Why would some random Mojave Courier care about the Enclave? This group primarily defeated on the East Coast years earlier. Unless
they were the person who defeated the Enclave. Unless that focus is like muscle memory. Deeply buried trauma and experience bleeding through the amnesia. It makes perfect sense if the Courier is the Wanderer.
It fits so well.
Yeah.
That's the seductive power of the theory. And you add in little things, like the dog meat companion. The Lone Wanderer canonically travels with dog meat, the constant presence of a loyal dog companion in the series. It reinforces that archetype of the solitary hero and their dog, linking the two characters thematically.
Okay, let's throw in a fan question here. This is from Bloatfly Eater 69. Classy, they ask. Okay, Wanderer Courier makes some sense, but what about their personalities? My Wanderer was a total saint, capital Wasteland savior. My Courier, total psycho mercenary, just out for caps. How does that track?
That's a great question, Bloatflighter 69. It gets into role-playing versus potential character arc. And, well, think about what the Lone Wanderer went through. They might start as a savior, but the events of Fallout 3 are incredibly traumatic.
Finding your dad only to watch him die, being betrayed or rejected by your home vault, making impossible choices, killing potentially hundreds, maybe thousands of people by age 20.
Exactly. That kind of psychic toll could absolutely shatter someone's idealism. You could argue the Wanderer was already becoming hardened, maybe even unstable, by the end of Broken Steel. Then add 4 years of brutal cross-country survival, seeing the worst the Wasteland has to offer day after day.
And then getting shot twice in the head and left for dead.
Yeah. It's not hard to imagine that sequence of events transforming a chaotic good hero into a cynical, pragmatic, maybe even ruthless survivor who thinks, been there, saved that Wasteland, didn't get me anywhere. This time I'm getting paid. The Courier's cynicism could be the Lone Wanderer's final defense mechanism.
It really does paint a compelling picture, a complete tragic arc. It feels right.
It feels very right, which is why it's such a shame it's canonically impossible.
And here comes the hammer. Section 3. Shattering the illusion. Let's get into the definitive lore breaks.
All right, so we love the theory. It's elegant. It makes sense emotionally. But the timeline. The timeline is absolute. And it just doesn't work. Not even close when you look at the specifics.
Okay, lay it on us. The fatal flaw.
It all comes down to one single unavoidable year. 2277.
Okay, 2277. We know that's when Fallout 3 and Broken Steel conclude. The Wanderer is aggravating Project Purity, fighting Colonel Autumn, surviving the Purifier, taking down the Enclave at Adams Air Force Base. Busy year in DC.
Extremely busy. Decisive battles. The absolute peak of the Lone Wanderer's campaign on the East Coast. They are the central figure in these events. Meanwhile, what's happening 2,000 miles away in the Mojave?
Don't tell me.
The first battle for Hoover Dam. The initial major clash between the NCR and Caesar's Legion for control of the dam.
Yeah.
It also takes place in 2277.
Wow, okay, so the Wanderer cannot physically be in two places at once, leading major military campaigns on opposite sides of the continent in the same calendar year.
Not unless they mastered teleportation alongside alien tech, no. It's a direct, unresolvable contradiction.
Yeah.
And it gets worse.
How does it get worse?
Because of Lonesome Road and the events of the Divide, the Courier's backstory involves delivering a package, inadvertently, it turns out, that triggers nuclear detonations in the Divide, creating that hellscape and earning them a dark reputation. Ulysses tells us this happened before the first battle for Hoover Dam.
So still in 2277, or possibly even late 2276.
Right. Meaning, for the theory to hold, the Lone Wanderer would have had to finish saving DC, somehow instantly cross the country, establish themselves enough as a courier to get this critical, dangerous job, deliver the package that nukes the Divide, and then potentially be involved around Hoover Dam, all while simultaneously being documented as fighting the Enclave back east.
Yeah, okay. That's not just improbable, that's physically impossible according to the established timeline. The dates simply do not allow it.
It completely breaks the theory. It ignores the fact that the lone wanderer was deeply embroiled in the capital Wasteland's fate at the exact same time the Courier was establishing their own separate, significant history in the West.
And it does a disservice to the Courier, too, right? Trying to make them just an extension of the Wanderer ignores their own implied history.
Absolutely. The lore, especially hints from Ulysses and other dialogue, suggests the Courier spent considerable time in the core region, California, Nevada, maybe Utah, Montana, building connections, making deliveries, gaining experience before 2281. They weren't some fresh arrival in late 2277.
They needed years to become the person Benny thought was worth ambushing for the platinum chip. Years the lone wanderer was spending fighting super mutants in the Enclave.
Exactly. And let's not forget the age thing again. The lone wanderer is 20 in 2277, meaning they'd be 21 or maybe 22 by the time they supposedly caused the Divide incident and fought at Hoover Dam.
Whereas the Courier, thanks to the character creator, can easily be in their 30s, 40s, or even older. An experienced older Courier with a reputation makes way more sense for that role than a barely out of their teens recent arrival from the East Coast.
It just fits the narrative of New Vegas much better. The timeline, the implied history, potential age, it all points to the Courier being their own person with their own past, completely separate from the lone wanderer.
So, case closed. The two Wastelands theory, as much as we might love it, is definitively busted by the calendar. 2277 kills it dead.
Cold, hard, canonical truth. There were two different heroes facing two different apocalypses at the same time.
All right, so if the Wanderer didn't go west to become the Courier, what did happen in that missing decade? This brings us to Section 4, Fan Questions and Alternative Fates.
Yes, now we can get into the really interesting possibilities. The ones that aren't immediately shot down by the timeline, and some great questions from listeners too.
Let's start with one digging into the Wanderer's unique nature. This comes from Radchild Forever. Nice, they ask. You mentioned the radiation immunity being key. Is it ever really explained how that works? Was it something from Vault 101's experiments, genetics, or just game mechanics?
That's a fantastic question, because it really highlights what makes the Lone Wanderer unique among Fallout protagonists. The short answer is no, we don't get a detailed biological explanation. But the fact of it is undeniable. Surviving that massive radiation dose in the purifier control room in broken steel isn't just plot armor.
Right, they go into a coma for 2 weeks, but they survive something that should have instantly killed anyone else.
Exactly. It confirms they are, as the sources say, biologically different. Whether that's purely genetic luck, maybe a mutation picked up from the weird capital Wasteland environment, or even something related to Vault 101's purpose, we don't know for sure. But the result is functional immunity to lethal radiation.
Plus, by that point, they're probably loaded with RadAway, RadX, and have access to Brotherhood medical tech, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a character with, quote, ridiculous resources. They have the best chems, the best gear, potentially advanced medical knowledge or access through the Brotherhood. So even if lower levels of radiation still affected them, they had unprecedented means to manage it. They've essentially transcended normal Wasteland biology.
Okay, next up, another huge crossover theory, this one connecting to Fallout 4, from user Chaos Agent LW. Okay, the Deacon Lone Wanderer theory. It sounds nuts, but Deacon lies constantly about his past, just like someone trying to disappear would. And he mentions stuff about DC. What's the lore say on this one?
The Deacon theory. This one has legs, much more so than the Courier theory. Deacon, the Railroad's master of disguise in Fallout 4, is famously impossible to pin down. His backstory changes every time you talk to him. He could have been anyone, anywhere.
Which makes him a perfect candidate for a legendary figure trying to vanish, right?
Exactly. If the Lone Wanderer wanted to disappear, becoming a chameleon-like spy who constantly adopts new identities seems like a pretty smart way to do it. And, as the question notes, Deacon does drop hints. He makes comments about the capital Wasteland, like the water being drinkable, now a direct reference to Project Tyranny's success.
That feels like a deliberate nod, doesn't it?
It really does, and psychologically it fits. Imagine the Wanderer, traumatized, burdened by their legend, maybe disillusioned, reinventing themselves completely, dedicating their life to a secretive cause like the Railroad, always hiding. It tracks with a character trying to escape who they were.
So the personality fits, the hints are there.
Yeah.
What's the catch? Is it the timeline again? Fallout 4 is 2287, 10 years after Broken Steel.
The timeline is trickier here, but not necessarily a hard stop like with the Courier. Some sources, like terminal entries within the Railroad HQ, seem to suggest Deacon has been with the Railroad for a long time, potentially even before 2277 when the Wanderer was still busy in DC.
So he might have already been Deacon while the Wanderer was still, like, fighting super mutants in the metro tunnels?
That's the potential contradiction.
Yeah.
However, this is where the theory gets clever. If the lone wanderer is Deacon, who's to say they didn't use their genius-level hacking skills, maxed intelligence, science, to retroactively create Deacon's earlier records?
Wow. So they didn't just adopt the identity, they backdated it within the Railroad's own systems to make it look like he'd always been there.
Precisely. It's the ultimate disappearing act. You don't just change your face, you change the past. Given the Wanderer's skills and resources, altering some terminal entry seems entirely plausible. It neatly sidesteps the main chronological objection.
Okay, that's pretty convincing, actually. It moves it from impossible to highly speculative but plausible. Much better footing than the Courier idea.
Definitely. It remains one of the strongest possibilities for the Wanderer's fate on Earth. But
Yeah.
what if they didn't stay on Earth?
Ah, yes. The final frontier. Path 1. The Zetan starship. We mentioned it earlier, Mothership Zeta. The lone wanderer is the only player character who ends up owning a fully functional alien spacecraft.
And not just the ship. It comes with orbital weapons platforms, the Bradley Hercules arrays. After taking out the Enclave's satellite network at Adams AFB, the Wanderer effectively controls Earth orbit, or at least has the most powerful toys up there.
So why stick around dealing with raiders and mirelurks when you can explore the galaxy?
Exactly. This theory suggests the Wanderer, maybe with companions like Fox, Dogmeat, maybe even some of the rescued humans or friendly aliens from the ship, just left. They went full sci-fi adventurer.
Yeah.
Star Trek, Guardians of the Galaxy, whatever you want to call it.
It makes sense from a power scaling perspective, right? What challenge is left on Earth for someone who can call down orbital strikes and owns a spaceship?
Pretty much none. Only the vastness of space, maybe finding other Z-hand forces or entirely new alien species, could offer a comparable challenge. It's the ultimate Wanderer fate, leaving the planet itself behind.
And this connects to that funny little fan theory about the crashed UFO you find in Fallout 4.
Yes, the idea that the crashed Zetan ship near Oberlin Station wasn't an invasion attempt, but actually the lone wanderer having a bit of a fender bender in orbit.
Like, they forgot to signal before changing lanes between Saturn and Jupiter and accidentally bumped a Zetan scout ship, sending it crashing down to Massachusetts?
Or maybe they were trying out the death ray and miscalculated the trajectory. Just Tuesday for the lone wanderer. It's hilarious, but it does fit that chaotic demigod profile. They're out there exploring, fighting, and maybe occasionally causing interstellar incidents that have consequences back on Earth.
It definitely explains the 10-year silence. Hard to get messages back from the Andromeda Galaxy.
It wraps everything up very neatly, if fantastically. But there's one more path. The darker one.
Path 2, the tragic exit. The idea that the Wanderer didn't go west, didn't go to space, didn't become Deacon. They just died somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah. This theory usually ties back into the rise of Arthur Maxon and the change in Brotherhood leadership. Maybe the Wanderer didn't leave. Maybe they tried to stay, tried to integrate, or tried to resist Maxon,
Right.
and maybe they died for it. Perhaps heroically, alongside Sarah Lyons. We know she dies sometime between the games. Maybe the Wanderer fell with her in some incident that Maxon later spun to consolidate his power.
Or maybe less heroically.
Or less heroically, maybe they were seen as too much of a liability, a symbol of the old ways, and were quietly removed, assassinated.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just vanished in the Wasteland. A powerful figure, yes, but the Wasteland is still dangerous. A lucky shot, an accident, an illness.
And Maxon's Brotherhood would have reason to maybe downplay or even erase the memory of this independent, chaotic figure who didn't fit their new world order.
Exactly. It feeds back into Moira's notes about the legend becoming distorted. If the reality, a hero's ignominious death or political assassination, was inconvenient, the new regime could just let the truth fade into myth and rumor. Let people argue if they were a saint or monster, because the real person is gone and safely buried.
It's a grim possibility, but it feels very Fallout. Heroes don't always get happy endings. Sometimes they just disappear and the machine moves on.
It raises that question too. Could Maxon's Brotherhood even take down the lone wanderer in a straight fight, given their power?
Seems unlikely. It would have to be betrayal, ambush, something covert.
Which again reinforces why disappearance, whether into the shadows as Deacon or into the stars via Zeta, might have been the most appealing or safest option for the Wanderer themselves.
Okay, so wrapping up part 2 here. We've journeyed across the continent and back, and maybe even into orbit. What's the big takeaway?
The big definitive takeaway is that the lone Wanderer, Courier 6 theory, while incredibly appealing and fun for headcanon, is canonically impossible. The timeline, specifically the events of 2277 on both coasts, absolutely forbids it.
They were saving DC while the Courier's dark past was being forged out west. Two different people, two different stories happening at the same time.
Exactly. So the Wanderer's fate, that missing decade, has to lie elsewhere. Either they stayed east and met a tragic end, or were erased by Maxon's regime.
Or they adopted a new identity, like maybe Deacon in the Commonwealth.
Or they used their unique asset, Mothership Zeta, to leave Earth's problems behind entirely and become an interstellar adventurer. Those seem like the most plausible remaining paths.
And that sets us up perfectly for part 3. Next time, we're going to dive deep exclusively into those final major theories. Deacon and the space pirate angle. We'll really unpack the implications.
Yeah, what does it really mean for a character to potentially transcend the setting itself? We'll explore the evidence for Deacon, the logistics of space travel, and the philosophical weight of those choices.
But before we go, I want to leave you all with something to chew on. A final provocative thought for this part. We've talked a lot about the Lone Wanderer's immense power, their isolation, maybe even their psychological instability after everything they went through, killing people they knew, making impossible choices. So consider this. Does the title Lone Wanderer just describe their journey? Or was the solitude, the eventual disappearance, maybe a necessary act? Was it a form of self-imposed containment? For someone that powerful, that potentially chaotic, is the most selfless act they could perform for the world they saved. To simply remove themselves from it, to protect it from their own influence.
It's the ultimate paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Savior becoming so powerful that their very presence is a potential threat. Sometimes maybe the best way to ensure peace is just to leave.
Something to think about. Keep digging for those answers, everyone, and we will see you next time for the concluding part of the Lone Wanderer's missing decade.
Welcome back, everyone. This is it, the final and, let's be honest, pretty necessary chapter of our big 3-part deep dive into the monumental structural failure that is the Lone Wanderer's disappearance.
It really has been quite the journey, hasn't it? We started out, thinking we were tracking a hero, and we ended up neck deep in the psych profile of a radiation-immune, functionally psychopathic demigod who basically saved the entire capital Wasteland and then just vanished. Poof.
Okay, look, if you are just joining us now, seriously, stop. Go back and listen to parts 1 and 2. We are absolutely not spending time recapping the basics again.
Nope, time's too precious.
By now, you should get it. Lone Wanderer, this 19-year-old knight of the Brotherhood, they're the single most effective and, frankly, terrifying human weapon ever cooked up in the Wasteland. And we already proved definitively that the whole going west to become Courier 6 theory, canonically dead. DOA. Thanks, 2277.
Yeah, fell the established timeline on that one, seriously. Robbed us of the greatest Fallout crossover imaginable. But, alright, since that path is completely blocked, we have to face the next question. When a force of nature, like the Lone Wanderer, decides to just, kick rocks, where the hell do they actually go?
And that is exactly our mission for part 3 today.
Yeah.
If they didn't wander west and conveniently get shot in the head, what other monumentally unstable possibilities are left on the table?
We're diving into the 3 most compelling and maybe the most terrifying alternative fates for this demigod who saved DC.
We've got the path of the god space pirate extraordinaire. Then there's the path of the ghost becoming a master of disguise. And finally, the path of the tragic hero betrayal, erasure, a whole depressing 9 yards.
Yeah, this whole deep dive, fundamentally, it's about the so what of having ultimate power, right? What actually happens when one person gets an arsenal, both physical and psychological, that just makes them totally incompatible with the peace they supposedly created.
They basically transcend their own world and maybe decide the society they just saved can, figure its own shit out from now on.
Exactly. Good luck, mortals.
Okay, let's dive in. And we have to start with the one that basically throws the entire Fallout rulebook out the airlock. All right, let's unpack this first one. The Path of the Gods. Yeah. It's outlandish, definitely the most out there, but it hinges entirely on the Mothership Zeta acquisition, and you really cannot overstate how much of a game changer that is. It just completely unbalances everything.
Oh, absolutely. It fundamentally shifts the character's entire operational capability. I mean, think about it. Every other Fallout protagonist, The sole survivor, the courier, even the original vault dweller, they're all scrounging, right? Dealing with ground level crap, logistics, scavenging.
Yeah, fixing pipe rifles and
Yeah.
worrying about raid roaches.
Exactly. The Lone Wanderer is the only protagonist, canonically, who ends their main story arc in command of a fully functional interstellar vessel. They go from being a kid looking for their dad to, like, Captain Kirk armed with a power fist and a really bad attitude. It's insane.
We should probably spend a sec on the specifics here, because it's not just some, rusty bucket they patched up. The sources are clear.
Mm-hmm.
The LW led a full-on mutiny against the Z-10 command structure. They seized complete functional control of this massive alien ship. All the tech, the weapons, everything.
And that's just the ship itself. Let's not forget the little bonus prize they picked up during the Broken Steel expansion.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The Bradley Hercules orbital satellite array. This is the point where the Lone Wanderer stops being just a really scary knight and basically becomes a rogue global superpower.
People tend to gloss over the Bradley Hercules, but it's crucial. This wasn't just like a weather satellite. It was the Enclave's ultimate ace in the hole, a network of orbital platforms capable of raining down these devastating, super precise energy strikes anywhere on the East Coast, basically on command.
So, control over that array means the Lone Wanderer possesses an independent orbital weapon system, the ultimate view button that only they can push.
Combine that with the whole radiation immunity thing they got from the FEV exposure in Project Purity and the alien spacecraft. I mean, the LW is literally untouchable at this point. No force left on Earth can realistically threaten them.
Okay, so let's connect the dots. The logical rationale for leaving Earth. You're standing there, middle of the ruins of DC. You're basically immune to radiation, feral ghouls, whatever. You can call down orbital strikes like ordering pizza. And you have a fully stocked spaceship orbiting overhead, probably with weird alien booze. Why in the living hell would you stick around?
Right. Earth suddenly looks incredibly boring and small. It presents absolutely zero challenge, zero threat after the Enclave is gone. The Brotherhood, yeah, they're getting organized under Maxon eventually, but they can't shoot down an interstellar vessel capable of jumping who knows where. Raiders, super mutants, they're just target practice from orbit.
Their personal power level has literally punched through the damn atmosphere.
Yeah.
The only logical next step for someone called the Wanderer is to just keep going. Outward. Way outward.
Exactly. The ultimate fulfillment of the Wanderer title, just on a scale nobody could have possibly imagined. The LW basically transcended the entire regional, post-apocalyptic sandbox of the Fallout universe. They outgrew the planet.
And this is where the theory gets, let's say, charmingly absurd. Because the sources suggest the LW didn't just, fly off solo. They supposedly put together a ragtag crew.
Oh God, the crew. We're potentially talking about Fox, the super mutant intellectual who quotes literature. Maybe Charon, the ghoul bodyguard who just wants contractual clarity. Dog meat, obviously. Maybe even that cyber samurai guy from the simulation. Imagine that bridge crew.
That's not Starfleet, man. That's a galactic traveling circus run by a teenager with anger management issues and access to WMDs.
Yeah.
It really is just the LW wasn't interested in, organized exploration or diplomacy. They just grabbed their weirdest friends and went on the ultimate cosmic road trip to get away from all the boring humans. Full space pirate.
Right.
Galactic menace,
Yeah.
probably.
And what's really fascinating, or maybe just funny, is how fan theories try to stitch this space madness back into later games, specifically Fallout 4. It's like this meta-narrative wink, you know?
You're talking about the UFO crash theory, right?
Yeah.
The sources get specific on this one. The idea is that the crashed Zatan scout ship you find near Oberlin Station in Fallout 4,
Yeah.
that wasn't some new invasion attempt.
Nope. The theory flips it. If the Lone Wanderer is tooling around the solar system in Mothership Zeta around that time, maybe that crash wasn't an invasion. Maybe it was just the LW having a cosmic fender bender.
So the Lone Wanderer, the single most efficient killing machine in the history of the Wasteland, is also such a chaotic a-hole pilot that they forgot to check their mirrors between Saturn and Jupiter, clipped a poor Zayden scout and sent it careening back to Earth for the sole survivor to find a decade later.
That is the ultimate expression of unstable efficacy, isn't it? Their power is so immense, their mere screw-ups become intergalactic incidents that shape events on Earth years later.
It provides this really clean, if completely bonkers, explanation for the LW's total silence during that missing decade, 2277 to 2287. It's kind of hard to send a postcard from the Andromeda Galaxy when you've accidentally started a war with sentient space slugs because they looked at dog meat funny.
The narrative elegance is there, despite the absurdity. It perfectly explains the immediate total radio silence. when you basically become a god, or at least a heavily armed space hobo, the squabbles of the capital wasteland just stop registering. It's the ultimate self-imposed exile.
It also gives a damn good reason why someone like Arthur Maxson later on would be absolutely terrified of the chaos associated with the Lion's Area and anyone connected to it. If your Star Knight literally flew off into space with a super mutant, a death claw, and control over an orbital death ray, yeah, that's a legacy you'd want to bury.
Deep. One hell of a loose end floating around up there.
Absolutely. Okay, wow. Let's try and reel it back in from the cold void of space and plant our feet back on the slightly less irradiated dirt of Earth for the next possibility.
Yeah.
All right, so from potential galactic warlord status, we swing back to Earth for the path of the ghost. This theory is way more grounded, comparatively speaking. It suggests the lone wanderer, needing to utterly disappear but maybe not wanting to abandon humanity entirely, adopted this constantly shifting, lying persona, specifically Deacon, the railroad operative from Fallout 4.
And this theory, it gets a lot more traction than the Courier idea, mostly because, well, it has its own timeline hurdles, which we'll get to. It's not instantly nuked by the calendar. And maybe more importantly, it fits the lone wanderer's likely shattered psyche almost perfectly.
Yeah, think about the state they'd be in. We're talking about someone deeply traumatized, unbelievably powerful, but also trying desperately to escape their own impossible legend. That whole saint or monster thing Moira Brown writes about later, it's their reality.
Exactly. You rack up a body count in the thousands before you're even 20. You save the damn world with Project Purity, defeat the Enclave single-handedly, basically, only to get shunned by your childhood home, Vault 101. And then you see the writing on the wall with Maxson's rise in the Brotherhood, this new, rigid, dogmatic authority coming in.
The disillusionment has to be immense. The LW would realize that despite everything they did, despite their incredible ability to just get done, the world they saved, it doesn't actually have a place for them. Not really. They're too independent, too destructive, maybe just too weird and powerful for any organized group to trust.
So self-erasure becomes the ultimate survival strategy. And maybe, just maybe, a way to keep contributing, but from the shadows.
And the Deacon persona, it's the perfect vanishing act, isn't it? A character whose backstory changes every time you talk to him, who lies constantly, even when telling the truth would be easier. The lone wanderer, already a master of stealth, infiltration, sneaking around, becoming the ultimate chameleon, just feels right.
But it's not just psychological projection. There's that one canonical clue, that tiny little nugget in Fallout 4 that makes this theory really compelling. Holds water,
Oh yeah, this is the good stuff. It's super specific, tiny detail, but it's delicious. Deacon's idle chatter in Fallout 4, he casually mentions that the water in the capital wasteland is actually drinkable now.
Just pause on that line for a second. Actually drinkable now. That is a direct, specific reference to the long-term success of Project Purity, the single biggest achievement of the lone wanderer's entire miserable young life. Its effect tied so deeply, so personally to their actions.
It's not just like general wasteland trivia someone might pick up. It feels like proprietary knowledge, lived experience. Who the hell hanging out in the Commonwealth almost a decade later would just casually know that? Or even feel the need to mention it? Unless they were the one who flipped the switch. It's this undeniable little thread connecting Deacon back to DC. Way stronger than just wishful thinking.
Totally agree. It elevates the theory significantly. However, no deep dive is complete without banging our heads against the goddamn timeline again. There's a major chronological conundrum. Railroad terminal entries, the ones you can find in their HQ, strongly suggest Deacon was already active with the railroad before 2277.
Which is the exact same year the lone wanderer was still, busy blowing up the Enclave oil rig and purifying the Potomac.
Yeah.
So, on paper, that looks like a theory killer, right? How can they be in two places at once?
This is where we have to stop treating the lone wanderer like some regular schmuck and remember their canonical skill set. Which brings us to the counter-argument, the LW as the master hacker.
Right. If the LW is Deacon, they wouldn't just adopt an identity. Someone with their abilities would fabricate its history, meticulously.
We know the LW canonically has, maxed out intelligence, science, hacking skills. Remember, this is the person who successfully infiltrated Raven Rock, the Enclave's deepest, most secure command bunker. They didn't just pick a lock. They bypassed complex security systems, maybe even manipulated data.
And Raven Rock wasn't just some shack with a password prompt. It was the heart of the Enclave war machine on the East Coast. Highly secure, deep underground.
Yeah.
The LW got in, did their thing, got out. And let's not forget, they also demonstrated the know-how to interface with and control that Bradley Hercules orbital array. That requires serious tech skills.
So the fan counter argument is pretty straightforward. For someone who can crack Raven Rock and manage orbital weapons, slipping into the Railroad's relatively low-tech internal network and altering some terminal logs to backdate Deacon's activity, that's not just plausible, it's probably trivial for them. It's a simple act of digital camouflage.
Okay, but I gotta push back a little here. Doesn't that feel like overkill? Like using a tactical nuke to swat a fly? If the LW has that level of power hacking skills bordering on technomancy, orbital lasers, alien tech, using it just to fudge some dates in a basement computer system for a small, secretive group, it almost feels beneath them, doesn't it?
But see, that's maybe the tragic beauty of this theory. The goal isn't efficiency, the goal is anonymity. Total self-erasure. For the LW, leveraging their god-tier tech skills to meticulously craft a completely untraceable, backdated identity isn't overkill, it's a fundamental defense mechanism. It's about burying the lone wanderer so deeply no one can ever dig them up again.
Okay, I see that. It transforms the LW from just a wanderer into the ultimate survivor. Not dead, not aimlessly drifting through space, but consciously choosing to dedicate their unique, chaotic skill set, stealth, combat, tech mastery to a cause. A secretive anti-authority cause like the Railroad.
And it's a cause that kind of fits, right? They see the institutional power of the Brotherhood heading in a direction they can't stomach under Maxon, so they throw their lot in with a grassroots organization fighting for synthetic life, the very kind of abomination Maxon's Brotherhood would later hunt down. It's like the LWs continuing the ideological fight they started under Elder Lyons, just completely off the books, in disguise.
That does have a profound narrative elegance to it. It makes the silence, the disappearance, not an accident of geography or physics, and a deliberate psychological choice. An act of sacrifice, maybe? Giving up their identity to keep fighting the good fight, hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
Okay, now we need to shift gears, hard. We're moving away from elaborate survival schemes and into something darker, more grounded, and honestly, statistically, probably the most likely scenario given the politics of the Wasteland.
Yeah.
This is the path of the tragic hero. And it doesn't start with a spaceship or a disguise. It starts with the inevitable power shift that pulls the rug out from under the Lone Wanderer.
This really centers on the end of the Lyons era in the Brotherhood. The Lone Wanderer's position, their influence, their very safety within the Brotherhood structure, it was all completely dependent on Elder Owen Lyons' leadership, his progressive, humanitarian, somewhat flexible approach. But the sources mention, even during the game, Lyons' health was failing. It was a known issue.
His death was basically inevitable. And we know historically what happened next. The rise of Arthur Maxon. And Maxon isn't just a new boss. He represents a fundamental reset, a hard turn back towards the original Brotherhood doctrine.
Yeah.
He's the descendant of the founder, Roger Maxon, and he brings back that old school, isolationist, technology hoarding, deeply suspicious of outsiders vibe.
And that political earthquake instantly makes the Lone Wanderer a massive problem, a huge ideological liability. Under Maxon's regime, the one we see fully formed in Fallout 4, the LW becomes this ticking time bomb within the Citadel.
Why exactly?
Yeah.
Because the LW represents everything Maxon wants to purge. They're too independent, they don't take orders well, they're way too powerful, bordering on uncontrollable. And they embody that whole humanitarian share the tech with the Wasteland approach, like with Project Purity, which Maxon absolutely despises. Maxon demands rigid, absolute order. The LW is chaos, unstable efficacy personified.
It's just peak Fallout cynicism, isn't it? The most effective hero the East Coast has ever seen, the one who literally saved the region from the Enclave, immediately becomes politically inconvenient, ideologically incompatible with the new management. It just proves that war might not change, but politics sure as hell does, and power always consolidates.
Let's really drill down on how precarious the LW's position was because of their power. This wasn't just some knight who disagreed with the new elder. This is someone with, well, frankly, ridiculous abilities. Radiation immunity, access to insane gear, pre-war military training from the Anchorage simulation. Oh, and maybe knowledge of how to use an orbital death laser and potentially command of an alien mothership.
That Operation Anchorage training is key, I think, to understanding Maxon's potential fear. The LW didn't just do the simulation, they reportedly mastered advanced pre-war tactics and weaponry to a degree probably no one else in the Brotherhood could even comprehend. If the LW decided to actually push back against Maxon's new direction, it wouldn't be a debate, it wouldn't even be a civil war. It'd likely be a very short, brutal political execution, followed by the lone wanderer potentially dismantling the entire East Coast Brotherhood single-handedly if they felt like it. This sheer, overwhelming power imbalance, combined with the political tension, it fuels all the dark speculation about what really happened in that missing decade, particularly the theories involving betrayal and manipulation, because that's the only way you could take down someone like the LW. Yeah, there are a few grim possibilities floated in the fan theories and source discussions. One is the sort of heroic but still tragic end. The idea that the LW might have died alongside Sentinel Sarah Lyons. We know Sarah canonically dies sometime between Fallout 3 and 4, often speculated to be during some tough campaign or internal conflict.
So in this scenario, maybe they settle together, fighting side by side against some genuine threat. But then, Maxon could easily spin that narrative, couldn't he? Manipulate the story of their deaths to consolidate his own power? See, the chaos and outreach of the Lions era led to the loss of these great heroes. We must return to the old ways, be strong, be isolated to prevent such tragedies. It justifies his entire regime change.
But then there's the really cynical theory, the one that feels disturbingly plausible in the cutthroat politics of the Wasteland. Straight up political assassination. Maxon and his loyalists would see the LW as this unstoppable, high-profile symbol of the old regime who just wouldn't fall in line. A dangerous loose cannon who couldn't be controlled.
And like we said, a direct confrontation against a radiation-immune knight in T-51B armor who might have orbital strike capability. That's suicide. So if Maxon felt he had to remove the LW, he'd have to use covert means, deception, betrayal. It's the only weapon that reliably works against the demigod.
Some sources even speculate about a really ignominious end. Like maybe they were lured into a trap by someone they trusted. Or perhaps something even darker, like a targeted drug overdose disguised as an accident. Something quick, quiet, deniable. It allows Maxon to remove the obstacle without ever having to face them directly, without risking his own power base in an open fight. It's easier and politically safer to destroy the legend quietly than to defeat the person publicly.
And the silence that follows. The complete lack of information about the LW's fate in later games, that becomes the most damning piece of evidence supporting this tragic path. It speaks to the shame and the political necessity of the Brotherhood actively erasing the lone wanderer from history.
Exactly. If the LW did die in a way that was inconvenient or embarrassing for the Brotherhood, betrayed by their own, killed under questionable circumstances, the new Maxon regime has every single reason to scrub them from the records, to turn the savior of the capital wasteland into a footnote, a rumor, a ghost.
Maxon needs a clean slate to build his own legend, right? He needs to be the new focal point, the strong leader rebuilding the Brotherhood, the memory of this chaotic, hyper-competent demigod from the previous administration. That has to go. They become the monster, or the tragic failure, whose story implicitly justifies Maxon's iron-fisted control. It's the perfect historical whitewash. Allows Maxon to stride onto the stage in Fallout 4 as the undisputed, rightful leader, untainted by the messy humanitarian ideals of the past. This path is just bleak. It suggests the hero wasn't taken down by the Enclave or super mutants or some external evil. They were destroyed by the very institution they helped save, betrayed from within. So, okay, whether they're out there captaining a starship full of misfits, lurking in the shadows of Boston as a master spy, or lying forgotten in some unmarked grave near the Citadel, the Lone Wanderer's ultimate legacy seems to be one of just profound dissonance, instability, a void where a person used to be.
Yeah, and to really wrap our heads around this, let's circle back to maybe the most concrete piece of meta lore we have about their fate. Those notes from Moira Brown's official game guide, the one supposedly written around 2297. That's nearly 20 years after the LW vanished.
In those notes,
Yeah.
they perfectly capture the complete erosion of the individual, the chaos surrounding their memory. Moira literally writes that people can't even agree on the Lone Wanderer's gender anymore, man or woman, she asks, or their fundamental morality, saint or monster.
It shows that the Lone Wanderer achieved this mythic status that completely overwhelmed the actual human being. Their actions were so consequential, their power so immense, that the legend literally consumed the person. They ceased to be an individual and just became a story. A conflicting, confusing story. It's the ultimate price tag for being the most effective protagonist in the series. You lose yourself to the narrative you created.
Then that ties directly back into the theme of isolation, doesn't it? The sources really hammer this home. The LW never seemed to form solid anchoring relationships. This isn't a character who puts down roots.
Not at all. Think about the companions. Fox, Charon, Cross, Butch, even Dogmeat. They function more like strategic assets, temporary allies, or tools of convenience, rather than deep, meaningful connections. There's always a transactional element.
And the settlements, too. Places like Megaton or Tenpenny Tower. The sources suggest the LW viewed them primarily as, like, stash boxes, safe houses, resource nodes, not homes, not communities they belong to.
Which is why that title, Lone Wanderer, feels so incredibly earned, not just as a cool moniker, but as an inescapable description of their state of being. They were profoundly alone, perhaps because their experiences, their power, their actions made them fundamentally alien to everyone else around them. They saved the goddamn region, wiped out the Enclave, fixed the water. But the cost was everything personal. Connection, stability, normalcy. Isolation wasn't just a consequence, it was maybe the only reward left.
Which brings us right to the core paradox of the Lone Wanderer's entire existence, I think.
Yeah.
They are, without question, the most effective, the most overpowered, the most consequential protagonist in the entire Fallout series. Their ability to get things done, their maximal utility, it's just off the charts.
Absolutely undeniable, but, and this is the huge but, the path they took to achieve what we generally call good outcomes, activating Project Purity, destroying the Enclave threat, it required the staggering level of relentless, cold-blooded violence, this inherent psychological instability. It forged them into something that was ultimately unfit for the very peace they created. They became the living embodiment of the war they fought, the war they mastered.
And that leads us back to the really profound question that kind of underpins all three of these theories we've talked about. The question the sources keep poking at. Was their decision to disappear, whether it was blasting off into space, melting into the persona of Deacon, or succumbing to betrayal and death, was it ultimately an act of selfless wandering? Like protecting the fragile, recovering society from their own potentially destructive influence?
Or was it something sadder? Was it the broken, maybe subconscious realization that they were simply too powerful, too damaged, too inherently chaotic to ever actually be allowed to settle down, to live among the ordinary mortals they saved? They could fix the Wasteland's water supply, but they couldn't fix themselves.
It's the ultimate, most fed-up version of the "war never changes" tagline, isn't it? And told through the lens of one incredibly powerful, incredibly unstable teenager. The hero's greatest tragedy wasn't the horrors they faced, but the sheer magnitude of the violence and power they mastered, which ultimately exiled them from any kind of normal life, prevented them from ever truly finding a home.
And that right there is why the Lone Wanderer's story, or lack thereof, remains probably the most compelling and definitely the most unresolved puzzle in the entire Fallout saga. It's just a fantastic, chaotic, ultimately unknowable mess. #OutR.
Well, folks, we did it. We have officially slammed the book shut on this absolutely monumental three-part deep dive into the glorious shot show that is the Lone Wanderer's legacy. Seriously, thank you for sticking with us through all of this. It was
a lot. It really was. And while we can definitively say the East Coast owes its continued irradiated existence to this chaotic powerhouse, their actual fate, still completely wide open. It's pure headcanon territory from here on out. Whether you like your wanderer exploring distant galaxies, whispering secrets in Boston back alleys, or feeding the raid roaches beneath the Citadel thanks to a scheming pretty boy elder, it's all on the table.
Okay, but before we go, final provocative thought.
Yeah.
Something for you to chew on. We spent a ton of time this series dissecting how the Lone Wanderer couldn't have gone west, right?
Yeah.
Because of those pesky bullshit calendar dates in 2277 messing up the Courier 6 theory.
Right. Damn you, timelines.
But just consider this for a second. What if?
Yeah.
What if the LW had somehow fixed their timeline issue? What if they used those master hacker schools we talked about, fabricated their history so perfectly, they wiped the slate completely clean, and then decided, you know what? FTC. I need a new adventure, something bigger. What kind of utterly fed-up power vacuum situation would they be walking into out west around that time?
Out west, you say? Well, a new adventure like that. It would probably need a truly vast, morally gray sandbox to play in. Maybe, like a huge desert, filled with warring factions perhaps, maybe centered around some kind of massive, strategically vital dam that holds the key to the whole region's future. And I don't know, maybe there's a charismatic guy in a really sharp checkered suit pulling strings behind the scenes, playing chess with everyone's lives.
Indeed. Interesting possibilities out west. Now that we're officially done dissecting DC's resident demigod, maybe, just maybe, it's about time we started thinking about following that legendary path west ourselves. Perhaps check in on a certain courier who had a rather memorable headache.
We'll see.
We'll see you soon for the next deep dive. Keep digging.